Hi, everyone. We're so proud to have so many great folks joining us from all over the country. My name is Elizabeth Gore, and I am the co-founder and president of Hello Alice. We're a social enterprise that helps small business owners launch and grow. Right now, we've kind of changed the way we think of it as survive and thrive. I don't know if all of you are aware, but there is an apocalypse happening called COVID-19. And if you're like me and homeschooling children, taking care of elderly parents, and running a business, it is one heck of a unique, challenging time. But our best partner in all of this has been the National Chamber of Commerce and Chamber of Commerce Foundation. We have been so proud to stand behind their leadership as they are helping thousands of business owners like you all every day. It is a real pleasure for me to, first of all, introduce you to Tom Sullivan. I also want to introduce you to Tom's shoes, if he's willing to show us, just to bring some levity to the situation here. There we go. Tom, welcome. Tom Sullivan is the Vice President of Small Business Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. If you are not already a member of a chamber, whether it's national or in your local area, I encourage it. I still think they're our best advocate as business owners. One of the things that I'm the biggest fan of Tom as I read through is he's such an advocate for local small businesses and really thinking about the power of Main Street and the new digital Main Street and helping us through this. But Tom, I'd love if you give us a little bit about your background and your role at the Chamber.
Sure. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for hosting me on this webinar. And I mean, kudos to you. You know, we are in the middle of a terrible, terrible situation. And we are both dedicated to helping small businesses. And as hard as it is, the work that we're doing is so fulfilling because before the pandemic and after the pandemic, we're going to continue to support small business. And it makes me feel so good to know that you're helping folks through the pandemic and that you're going to help even more to survive and thrive, to really thrive afterwards. As far as my background, grew up in Boston, moved down to Washington, D.C., similar to the time that you spent in Washington, D.C. I moved here to try to make a difference for as many people as I could. It's part of what attracts young professionals to Washington, D.C. Unlike you, though, I didn't leave because the ability to help people, to help small businesses on a national scale is what gets me out of bed every morning. And so to be able to work on behalf of 3 million businesses at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, as you know, Elizabeth, we actually are a federation of over 1,600 state and local chambers of commerce. And when you look at their membership, which is our membership, that means that 96% of our members have fewer than 100 employees. 75% of our members have fewer than 10 employees. So it's times like this that those small businesses really are depending on Hello Alice, and they're depending on their local and national chambers of commerce for information.
Thank you, Tom. And again, welcome to, it's great to see so many of you. I want to encourage you through all of Tom's presentation to put questions either in the chat or the Q&A, and we will address those. Have an open Q&A at the end of Tom's presentation, but please throw them in there as you're thinking about it. Additionally, if you're multitasking, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation and Hello Alice, we have built a significant center for all of you that aggregate small business resources. So if you go to COVID-19 Business Center, COVID19businesscenter.com, you will see guides on how to apply for federal assistance. You will see private funds. There's mental health resources. There are also the latest policy updates from the U.S. Chamber. So every time you see a news source and you don't know if it's true or not, I tell people go to the Chamber. Finally, I live in Northern California. I'm originally from Texas, that country down south. And was in DC for almost 15 years working for the UN. My absolute passion is small business. And Willie Nelson, I guess I have to say, because he's behind me, in about 5 posters. But today we're going to kick this off with Tom, and I'm going to ask him to please jump into his presentation to share with us the latest and greatest from the Chamber.
Elizabeth, thank you. Let's make sure. Okay, Elizabeth, thank you so much. I'm going to jump right into it, and that means that we'll have plenty of time for questions, which I find actually the most helpful. So let's just rewind a little bit to about 5 weeks ago, and actually it seems like it's ago, I think, for many of us. But just 5 weeks ago, it became obvious that the coronavirus was going to affect our economy. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce jumped into action to make sure that we were prepared. It was amazing bipartisan support where Congress and the White House passed 3 laws in 3 weeks, all to help America get through the pandemic. We are actually going to spend the most of the time on that 3rd law, which has an acronym because, Elizabeth, as you probably remember, if it starts in Washington, D.C., it has to have an acronym.
It has to have an acronym, yeah.
Yes. So this is the CARES Act, where we'll spend most of our time. So there are 2 main sources of capital for small businesses. Now, unfortunately, both of them depend on Congress appropriating the money. And the demand for capital has been so high, they ran out of money. And so right now, in the 3rd week of April, Congress is working to try to fix that situation. But for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to assume, and we are very optimistic that this will happen, that Congress will get money back into these programs. And the purpose for this discussion is to help small business owners get ready for when those programs are restarted. They'll have their information in order. They'll get it to SBA or to their bank so that it will run quickly and smoothly. So the first flow of money or capital comes from SBA, and that is SBA's disaster loan program. The second flow of capital is a brand new lending program called the Paycheck Protection Program. And of course, because it started in Washington, D.C., it has an acronym. It was the PPP loans. We'll talk about that, spend a good deal of time on that PPP loan system. But first, the SBA disaster program. To level set the small businesses who are tuned in, I do need to at least focus on the fact that SBA's disaster loan program has been around for about 60 years. This is not a new program. Unfortunately, the disaster loan program is designed for communities to rebuild after a fire or a tornado or a hurricane or a flood. Really never was intended to get small businesses through a pandemic like we're experiencing now. And when there's some frustration with this program, that seems to at least explain a little bit about those frustrations. So first of all, it is a program that has been around for about 60 years. The small businesses that are eligible for an economic injury disaster loan, an EIDL, are basically businesses with 500 or fewer employees. There are some exceptions that allow for slightly bigger small businesses to apply, but from a basic perspective, if you have 500 or fewer employees, you would be eligible to apply for an EIDL loan. These EIDL loans come specifically from SBA to the small business. And that's an important distinction between this program and the PPP loans that we'll talk about in a minute. The terms of the loan are up to $2 million for a 30-year fixed term. The administrator of SBA, Javita Carranza, has said that all principal and interest for an EIDL loan is postponed for a year. Now, the sheer volume of requests that started on March 16th have prevented SBA from lending out all the way up to the 2 million mark. I think last week when we saw the distribution starting to come out for EIDL loans, we saw that SBA was capping them at about $15,000. We're optimistic that Congress is going to take action to allow SBA to bring those loan amounts back up to where they're intended to be, up to 2 million. But again, the intention is for businesses to rebuild. It is a government program and it's not fast. The loan applications that started on March 16th were just starting to be fulfilled in the second week of April. So it is not a quick program. It is not intended to breathe cash immediately into small businesses. That's what the PPP loan program is for. There is one part of the SBA disaster loan program that is brand new. It is a grant program. When a small business is able to go onto sba.gov/disaster and apply for a loan, the third screen of the streamlined loan application has a little box that says, would you like to be considered for up to $10,000 for a grant? I would recommend that you check yes in that box. And what that means is 2 to 3 weeks later, when an SBA loan specialist communicates with you, because that's what happens, there actually isn't even a space on this application that says, how much are you applying for a loan? That happens when you talk with the loan specialist. And that conversation, which is basically like a lending conversation, the lending officer says, well, what kind of debt do you think that you can handle? And what type of cash flow do you have? What type of liquid assets do you have that will help your business rebuild? Normal conversations that happen between a loan officer and a borrower. The only thing different here is that it's a government official, not a bank official. And during that time, the small business that has applied for the grant is able to ask for that grant. And then within 3 days of that loan officer making the decision, then the grant is ACH'd to the small business. And here's the thing that makes the grant so attractive to small businesses. Even if you don't get an SBA disaster loan, you still are entitled to the grant, which is up to $10,000. And the way that SBA is administering the program, they're administering it on $1,000 per employee. So if you have 10 or more employees and you've applied for the grant, then you will get the whole $10,000. And that does not have to be repaid. And also, even if you don't get the SBA disaster loan, you still get the grant. Now, the PPP loans. This is a brand new lending program. And I think it's important for folks to understand that this program was stood up and started lending in less than 7 days. And in the 2-week time period, it has done 10 times the amount of loans that a community makes in an entire year. And the reason that I start with that is just, again, to set expectations from small business owners who legitimately are frustrated that the program isn't going completely smoothly. That's legitimate frustration. But when you're standing up a loan program like this, we expect some frustration. When you see reference to Congress passing $349 billion, or sometimes $350 billion for small business, this is the loan program that they're talking about. When you read in the paper that a loan program for small business ran out of money, this is the loan program they're talking about. When Congress is debating that we need $250 billion additional dollars, this is the loan program that they're talking about. Now, how much should a loan be? And this is where Congress actually laid out a calculation of how much a loan can be to breathe some capital into a small business so that they can survive through the pandemic. The calculation is you take last year or 12 months prior to application, you take your monthly payroll average. And in that payroll average, which can include healthcare premiums and retirement benefits, all the salaries up to $100,000. Then you take 1 month times 2.5, that's the loan amount. Now, fast forward 8 weeks. The small business then gets in contact with the bank, says, at the end of 8 weeks, I have spent over 75% of the loan assets on payroll, and 25% of those assets are spent on expenses that are detailed in the law: utilities, rent, mortgage interest, rent, and interest on prior debt obligations. When the borrower shows that to the bank, the loan converts into a grant. That money is forgiven. And the terms of that loan, and even the amounts that are not forgiven, are very attractive. 1% interest over a 2-year term. There are a lot of questions about eligibility and about the payroll calculations. Let me just hit a couple before we take questions. One is, how do you treat 1099 earners? We know a lot of restaurants, for instance, who depend on a musician coming in. And even though that musician is part of the attractiveness of going to that restaurant, when we all get back away from the stay-at-home orders and actually go out to restaurants and listen to music, when the restaurant pays that musician through a 1099, they may not include that musician's payments in the calculation for the loan. The good news is that the Willie Nelsons of the world are able to file for their own PPP loan. 1099 earners, otherwise known as independent contractors, are eligible to apply for a PPP loan, but that has caused a lot of confusion. We know certainly incredibly successful entrepreneurs who run their entire operations depending on 1099s. And those 1099s are eligible to file for their own PPP loans themselves. Now, there is an incentive to bring back employees. This also has created a little bit of confusion. So I'll back up for just a minute. The 3 laws that Congress passed in March, they all are intended to keep money in the pocketbooks of Americans. It's the realization that this is a healthcare crisis. People are dying from a disease. And when people have to take care of themselves and the people who they love, they need money to do that. And so in each of the 3 laws, there are attempts to, how do you guarantee that there are going to be money in people's bank accounts? And when they looked at small business, they obviously want small businesses to survive, but really they focus on the employees of those small businesses first. And so that's why when they look at what part of that loan can be forgiven, they look primarily on how do we incent the small business owner to hire back their employees, sometimes even if they're not working, to get money in those employees' pocketbooks, get money in those employees' bank accounts. And sometimes understanding that motivation explains a little bit of the weirdness of this law, but that was Congress's intent. So the latest news. This is part of my presentation that changes twice a day, every day. So on April 16th, at about 11 a.m. Eastern time, the PPP loans ran out of money, which is horrible. The good news is that Congress has come together and is trying to negotiate to put money back into the loan program. And so right now there is a giant pause on these loans. And there's a giant pause on SBA's disaster loans as well. There has been movement and negotiations. The latest has been that Republicans have said, we're willing to put hospital money as long as it gets a deal to make sure that small businesses are able to access these loans. We'll put hospital money in there, and that represents a significant movement to get this deal done. We're very optimistic of it happening, but it's certainly a late-breaking news as part of this webinar, and it's good for small businesses to know at least what's happening to set expectations. Now, when we talk about the pause, we get a lot of questions about, well, wait, my bank said that the loan is in process. Did I get the loan before the pause or after the pause? Here's some information that might be helpful. What happens is when you go to a private lender for a PPP loan, you submit your application, and then the bank, once that application is submitted, gets that application to SBA. SBA reviews and it assigns a loan number. It then shoots the loan number back to the bank. And once you have that number, once your bank has that number, then that means that you have the funds fenced off in that bank that will go to your account. So those borrowers who were in this system at the time when Congress hit the pause button, if they are told by their bank that that loan was assigned a number, they're okay. If not, they are truly in the pause. Or even if they had never gotten their material into the bank, this is a time where you get to know the system a little bit better. You have the conversation with your banker and your lender, and you prepare the information so that when Congress hits the play button, you have that information on your computer ready to go to the bank. So hopefully the process will run smoothly. It's good also to know, well, what was the flood of the system leading up to reaching 349 billion? So there were 1.6 million loans. The average loan was about $215,000. Here's what's remarkable. On April 3rd, when the first loans were made, there were 1,800 lenders in the system. In less than 2 weeks, there are 4,975 lenders. And there are more that want to come online as soon as Congress hits the play button. We do have a campaign to try to convince Congress to restore funding. It is the hashtag Save Small Business campaign. Please tell your congressmen, congresswomen, senators to restore funding. Now, at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and this is consistent with our partnership with Elizabeth and the wonderful work that Hello Alice is doing, we know that lobbying Congress is important. We know that educating small business is important. But what we've heard again and is nothing's more important than cash. And so I'm so proud of the U.S. Chamber Foundation starting the Save Small Business Fund. Applications start on April 20th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time, 12 o'clock Pacific Time. And the eligibility for the $5,000 grants has two pieces to it. One really gets at the fundamental purpose of the U.S. Chamber Foundation. They formed the foundation to help those people who need help the most. And so they are targeting on distressed communities. So they have a zip code finder for applicants. If you are in a distressed community, you are eligible. And if you have between 3 and 20 employees, you'd be eligible. This application will take less than 10 minutes, and the U.S. Chamber Foundation will be dispensing the $5,000 grants on a weekly basis until they run out of money. The website for this initiative is savesmallbusiness.com. Again, the website for the Save Small Fund is savesmallbusiness.com. And like how we want to get information, and that's why this partnership is so valuable between our organizations, because we know that the thirst for information, the thirst for cash is there, and we want to satisfy that thirst. So we do have a small business digital portal. I know that when Congress hits that play button, that there are two platforms that will get that information first. One is COVID19businesscenter.com, and one is the U.S. Chamber/C is updated today at a minimum, so that information will get out to small business who need. With that, back Elizabeth, and hopefully we'll jump questions.
Tom, thank you so much. That was incredibly helpful. And I like the way you're acknowledging that this can be frustrating, but it is unprecedented and folks are working as hard as they can. Great information. Thank you again. The Chamber does such valuable work year round, but especially during COVID-19. We have a lot of questions, Tom, so if it's okay with you, I'm going to jump in. I think that the first one is, when will it reopen? I think we've gotten that question about 7 times, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, we know that the alarm bell has been rung, and we know that that alarm bell has to continue to be rung. So the timing of it depends on the urgency that Congress feels. So to wake up this morning and to see that the money ran out, only covered on page 4 of national newspapers, the alarm is not ringing loud enough. So it's up. I hate to pass the football back, but the activation of the people who are part of Hello Alice, part of the Chamber of Commerce network, we are going to determine how fast Congress hits the play button. So turn up the volume, and until it appears on the front page of newspapers, then Congress isn't going to feel the urgency that's needed. I feel as though you deserve that type of honest answer. We're optimistic that a deal. I sound like my parents when I ask when we're going to get to someplace when we're in a car, when they say soon. I wish I had.
Are we there yet?
Yeah, I wish I had better information. And what really hurts my heart is knowing that how many small businesses are hanging by a thread. And so keep the volume turned up. However, while you're turning up that volume, please, please, please talk with a banker or a lender to make sure you have the information in order so that when play happens, you're able to hit the send button and you're able to get your loan application in the queue.
Tom, that's a perfect, so here's a 2-part question. I wanted you to repeat what you said earlier in case folks weren't on, but if you did submit an application and you did or didn't get a number, what does that mean? Part 2 of that question, if I may, if you haven't already applied, and when do you go ahead and apply even though it says money is run out? So 2-part question there. People that might need to reapply and or who haven't yet.
All right, so first of all, the loan number question. So this is important. So when you hit, because over some of the data of folks who are in the queue and told the bank, yes, we're sending your loan SBA. It's over 100 small businesses who are in that situation, Elizabeth. The data goes from the bank, well, the data goes from the small business to the bank. The bank then takes that, sends it to SBA. SBA assigns a number and sends that number back to the bank. If the bank, the borrower, or the lender, I should say, because CDFIs and others are also providing loans. If the lender or bank has the number from SBA, the small business gets the loan. If not, then they're in the queue and they talk with the banker about when the play button gets hit. Does it get automatically submitted? Do I have, every bank is a little bit different. Do I have to, hit a yes, please reapply? And we don't know how that's going to work because it's up to the individual bank. But this gets at your second question, though, and that is, what needs to be done if you had not gotten your application to a bank? Well, Elizabeth, with your help, let's set a date in September and October where it's a Hug Your Banker Day, because this is where those local chambers of commerce, every one of them has a national bank, a national bank person is on that chamber board, or a community or a credit union. Those relationships matter, and they matter now than ever before. And so all the person who you trust to handle, and what we've heard, Elizabeth, is probably consistent with what you've heard. Even if a lender isn't offering PPP loans when that play button gets hit again, they'll still tell you where to go. This is a time where a community is banding together. They want the small business to be successful. They're less concerned with, oh, well, am I going to lose my bank's business to my competitor bank? Like that is one of the last things on their mind. They want the business to be successful. And in that network, they are going to make sure that the small business borrower is directed to the right place, so that when that play button gets hit, that the information is in the queue and the process is all over again.
Another question, Tom, thank you for that, is I applied online on the SBA website. Do I still apply at a bank as well?
Oh, Elizabeth, that is a great question. So what that question means is that someone applied for an SBA disaster loan, and because you were able to apply, that means that the disaster was still accepting applications, because that actually stopped yesterday as well. The EIDL, remember, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, that is a government loan program. You also can go to a private lender and apply for the PPP loan. It is okay to apply for both. Now, if you do, may not spend the money on the same thing. From a small business perspective, you can't commingle the funds, but it's perfectly acceptable to both an SBA loan, PPP loans.
That is incredibly helpful. We have a lot of questions about sole proprietor here, and I know that you addressed some of that. But if I'm a sole proprietor and I have not applied for anything to date, what would be your best advice for those folks?
All right, so I'm so glad that you asked, because this caused a ton of confusion, and unfortunately I am not a banker, so I get even more confused.
You'd be a great banker, Tom.
No, I wouldn't, because I would give every small business money.
that's why you'd be a banker. We'd love that.
The simplest way to look at it is simply replace the word payroll with net income. That's the simplest. Now, when you get more technical, it's you go on your 1040 Schedule C and you go to line 31. That is the amount that you do. You do a monthly average which is the net income. Multiply that monthly by 2.5, you get the loan amount. So Elizabeth, I'll guess what the follow-up question is for this too, though, because now remember, July is the new April, right, for filing taxes. So what if I hadn't filled out my 2019 1040? Well, now's the time to do it. Fill out that 1040 because that line 31 for a sole proprietor is hugely important on the calculation of what you can apply for the loan.
Very helpful. How are PPP applications prioritized? Ooh, that's a big question.
Oh, it is a big question. And this is where actually Congress had it right on this, is that on the PPP loan system, they pushed the actual decisions out to the lenders and the bankers. And everyone's handling it differently. I think that the first round of applications, what we saw were incredible frustration with business owners who weren't able to get a loan because they had never taken a loan. And Elizabeth, you know this. I mean, small businesses do not like taking on additional debt. And so there were some small business owners who had had checking accounts with banks for dozens of years. They were put in the back of the line and they got pretty angry at the banks. It turns out that the banks had a really good reason. And the reason was that there are all of these anti-terrorism requirements called Know Your Customer, that if you had taken out a loan, they actually have more data than if you just had a checking account. And so they were prioritizing it based on the data, but I'm not sure if we did a good enough job to explain to small business owners that that's why you weren't in the queue. So that's a long way of explaining that it depends on the bank. Some banks are requiring that you have an account. Other banks are requiring that you had taken out a loan. And there are still others that don't have those requirements. And I want to add that there's one exciting piece that is stuck on the pause button. And that is the non-bank lenders. QuickBooks by Intuit, Square, Cabbage, On Deck. They all specialize in low dollar loans, and they are all waiting to hear from SBA on using their system. So when they come online, they will be poised to make loans without the traditional relationship that seems to be necessary to get a PPP loan from a lot of banks and credit unions and other financial institutions. But they were all given I guess the blinking green light is the closest way I can explain it. Because I always slow down when I see a blinking green light, but quite honestly, I forget really what it means. These non-bank...
That's a problem, Tom. I speed up.
Oh. Well, you're a triathlete. That's just in your name. So, so when that button is hit by Congress, we're going to be pushing that these non-bank lenders come online so that you don't necessarily have to have in order to get PPP loan. But that still, you still want to use the resources in your site, the resources in our site, to prepare the information to get to that point.
Two questions. One is, a lot of people are asking, is there a way to check the status of their applications?
So there's a two-part question, two-part answer to that. So status applications with SBA's disaster loan program. There are disaster assistance hotlines. Those are the only ways to check on your SBA disaster loan. And Elizabeth, I am friends with a lot of the folks where I used to work at the SBA, and my heart goes out to them. It is not an easy process. Get your phone out, sit down at the computer, call up the hotline, do other stuff while you're waiting, but that is the only kind of old school way of checking on your application for the SBA disaster loan. For the PPP loans, it is an individual determination by banks. There are some banks that have an electronic system. There are others that require you to be speaking with a customer service representative.
Very helpful. This one, I've had multiple webinars ask. It's a little long, but you'll get it. If you've previously applied for PPP through a bank like Chase and received an application number from them, but never received an SBA loan number, can you submit a new PPP application with a different bank or provider?
So what I have been told is unless you are electronically signing the obligation for the loan, the answer is yes. But if you have put your signature that authorizes the bank to make the loan on your behalf to SBA, then the answer is no.
Got it. Very helpful. So another question is, if I do have the option of applying to multiple institutions, do you have recommendations on how to prioritize which bank?
That's like when someone asks me which teenage boy is your favorite. Sorry.
Right.
Sorry. You know, I was asked this yesterday, and I said, well, whichever lender is a member of your local chamber of commerce, you go with them first.
Understood, understood. One size does not fit all. So there's a lot of questions about clarity around PPP forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to change? Would I be stuck with debt? And I've actually heard this quite a bit as well.
So I heard this best answered on a webinar this morning. Amazing, Elizabeth. This is our lives now. We are living the webinar lives. So I'm able
to. Yes, we are.
I'm able to wear my webinar shoes more often, which is great.
I'll show you here's mine.
Oh, those are awesome.
They're my Target slippers.
Excellent. The simple answer is we will get more details the closer we get towards that eight-week period. The way that Treasury and SBA have rolled out guidance has been synchronized with the program. So for instance, right before April 3rd, they got all this guidance out to the banks on how to make the loans. Then after April 3rd, they got all this additional guidance on how sole proprietors and independent contractors could apply because they weren't able to apply until April 10th. And so we see this kind of moving in a process along with the way the program is set up. We expect in the next 6 weeks that we will see more and more guidance having to do with the forgiveness portion of it. There have been a couple of sensible things though. That one sensible thing is when you get a PPP loan, it's recommended that you have a separate bank account set up with the bank that you're getting it from to have the records coming in and going out. So it's just easier. I mean, you're going to go back to that lender at the end of 8 weeks anyway. Why not have that checking account set up so that there is a transaction record that replicates what you're going to be asking for forgiveness?
Really good point. We'll let Tom take a quick breath because we have a lot more questions, Tom. And I want to remind everyone that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation is also giving away $5,000 grants through an application. We are also doing $10,000 grants at Hello Alice. You can find both of those links through www.covid19businesscenter.com. covid19businesscenter.com. Also, Tom's real live policy updates. The Chamber website's blog has phenomenal by-the-minute information. I do want to stress that that is, to me, the best source of news when it comes to your small business on these policy points. I'll answer this question to give Tom a second. There's 2 questions in here about scams. Unfortunately, there are folks out there that are predatory lenders that are scams. You want to make sure you're working with a legitimate bank. You can also go to the chamber website, particularly to your local chamber, and check the validity of that bank. If it's too good to be true, it might be. So I do want to caution folks about predatory lenders, as well as those are not certified with the SBA. Tom, I want to go back to this question, if I may. This business owner says, we have been closed since 317 and have been using funds from other sources to help support our employees because we simply couldn't wait for the PPP. How will it factor into the grant conversion process considering we sacrifice paying other bills to support our staff?
So, well, first of all, my heart goes out to you as a small business owner. And you're affirming what I say every day to Congress and to the White House, and that is that we don't necessarily need Congress to tell us to take care of our employees. That's what small businesses do. So thank you for affirming that with your question. The determination for the loan amount is based on 2019 primarily. And if that doesn't accurately reflect the average payroll, there are some other calculations you could do. So for instance, if you're a seasonal business, you could pick any 8-week period between March 15th, 2019 and June 30th, 2019 to come up with that calculation. But what you've taken on from a debt obligation between the beginning of the year and now shouldn't affect that calculation. Now, we have gotten a lot of questions about, well, what about in those 8 weeks? What if I'm in arrears for several bills? Or conversely, what if you want to front load your internet bill for 2 years? We don't have guidance on that yet. We expect that there be guidance within the next 6 weeks or so. What I'm advising small business owners is take a snapshot of what 2 months look like in ordinary time, which is pretty darn difficult these days. But if you took a snapshot of last July and last September, and you look at bills that come in those 8-week periods, it's that type of regularity is what is likely to be the forgiveness component in the PPP loans. However, there will certainly be guidance within the next 6 weeks that give more detail and, quite frankly, more official detail from SBA and Treasury than I can provide.
Great point. We have several folks who have just started their businesses. And P.S. to all of you, good. We believe in you. Keep going. All of us are in the same boat right now, even the new folks. So congratulations on your launches. The question, Tom, if someone is in the launch phase and had to quit their job but hadn't set up their business entity by February 1st, do they qualify for anything?
So the initial threshold is February 15th, 2020. You have to be in existence in February 15th, 2020. Now, there are provisions they call it the startup exemption. So the startup exemption recognizes that you don't have 2019 tax records or payroll records. So they allow for you to take January and February and create the average monthly payroll calculation based on that. Now, if it was between February 1 and February 20th, I don't know. I would certainly encourage that person to talk with their lender or their banker or any financial expert that is in their network. But the law at least recognizes a startup exemption that presumes January 1 through February 20th of this year.
I appreciate that. Tom, I want to switch on our last 10 minutes to a little less technical. And I think that being an entrepreneur is the most personal thing you can imagine. So business is personal. And really just sit for a minute and give everyone on this Zoom the encouragement and more personal advice, maybe between you and I for a minute, about, when we opened the call, we talked about running a business is already an awesome opportunity, but a challenge. Many of you are now doing it from your homes. You might be participating in childcare now, elder care, homeschooling. I'm terrible third grade math teacher. Didn't know that till now. Maybe you've had to go through the gut-wrenching decision to pause your business, to save money, to let some employees go. So Tom, I would just love from a personal standpoint, you know, what's your advice to business owners just personally getting through this?
Well, Elizabeth, thank you. So first of all, I have the best, I have the best job at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I get to get paid to talk with entrepreneurs and small businesses every day. So, and I benefit tremendously from them in good times and in bad. There is a wonderful woman, Melissa Bercier, in just outside of Chicago. She runs a mental wellness company, counseling, called Couch Clarity, and she and I talk.
Like that.
Yeah, she and I talk a lot, and she's told me what you probably heard, Elizabeth. She's like, you have to take time for yourself. And mental wellness is a huge, huge deal. So whether you're on some type of exercise bike, whether or not you've decided to do burpees in your living room, like these things, it's not just about looking good on a Zoom interview. It's about how you're doing yourself and your own health. Taking the time to do that, I think, is the best advice that I've gotten, and I've tried to take it to heart. I'll give some advice on what are some of the best times for me and my wife. It's the Zoom happy hours. You know, to connect with 3 or 10 people who maybe you saw, maybe you see once a year around Christmas time. Those provide the goodness that help on mental health. And I'll just give one other thing before I babble on and on and on. Celebrate what it means to be a community leader. I can't overemphasize that. We have this incredible company in Wyoming, Minnesota called, Stacy, Minnesota. It's called Wyoming Machine. They are an essential company because they make these little metal pieces that go in ventilators. And Tracy and Lori, who co-own this company, they give the sheet metal workers who are sacrificing to show up to work every day, there's this little card that says, you made this piece of metal and you're saving a health worker's life. They are celebrating what they're doing. And how they are part of an incredible ecosystem that, Elizabeth, you have devoted your life to. And I say, celebrate that not only with your employees, but with the entire community, because it's also helping your own mental health. And it's making people like me and you, Elizabeth, incredibly proud of the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Absolutely, Tom. And we very intentionally, Hello Alice and the Chamber Foundation built a resource center for all of you around mental health as an entrepreneur. And so you'll see that on the COVID-19 Business Center navigation. Also, I hope you reach out to each other. The best advice right now are between business owners. Find someone who applied for PPP and see if they'll walk you through it. People that have had to furlough employees, you know, get that tough advice. Also, I think it's really important for all of you to realize that we're all in the same boat right now, and that does give us an equal footing when we reopen. So, you know, don't feel like failures. We are all going through this. We're all having to make hard decisions. Join things like this, follow the Chamber's blogs. And then finally, I want for y'all to think of whenever you do find something that works, please tell us. The Chamber and Hello Alice, the best thing we can do is understand a tip that's working, a resource, a fund, anything, and we'll make sure that others see it. And then finally, Tom, tell us one more time, if you don't mind, 2 things. One is the website to apply for your grants. Well, start there, and then I'm going to ask you a second one.
Sure. So the website for the Save Small Business Fund is savesmallbusiness.com.
Great. And then again, Tom and I would really appreciate if all of you can encourage your congressional and state leaders to put more money back into these funds. And Tom, the hashtag there was?
Well, a little bit of a broken record, Elizabeth. So the hashtag is hashtag Save Small Business.
Awesome.
There's certainly a theme that's developing here.
I like it. I like it. And don't get overwhelmed. You can tweet, you can post, you can Facebook. You can also just go to congress.gov and type in your zip code, and it'll pop up who your congressman or woman is, and you can type it right in there so we can get you all the support you need. Finally, again, I want to first thank Tom and the leadership at the Chamber. We are on the phone with someone from the Chamber every day right now. They are living and breathing all of you right now, which I just want to thank you, Tom, for the dedication of the Chamber and the Chamber Foundation, as well as obviously the local Chamber leaders right now.
Oh, thank you, Elizabeth.
And finally, please, again, the National Chamber in Hello Alice, we have built the COVID-19 Business Center. You can get the latest policy updates from the Chamber. There are lists of private grants that you can apply for from corporations, mental health resources, and finally, we have built step-by-step guides. So when this funding does open again, these e-learning modules can walk you through, if you don't have a tight relationship with your banker, how to apply. I am so proud to say, as of yesterday, they're all in Spanish as well. Yeah. Finally, y'all hang in there. Entrepreneurs are the grit of this country. We will be with you Wednesdays and Fridays every week with more information. But talk to us. And Tom, I hope you have a great quarantini this afternoon on this Friday, and cheers to everyone else.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, folks, for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.